Hello and welcome. This is a lecture review for the William Stallings Effective Cybersecurity First Edition book. Again, this is a lecture review using the material offered by the publisher Pearson VUE. All copyrights belong to them. This is for educational purposes only. Again, the textbook is Stallings Effective Cybersecurity, a guide to using best practices and standards, first edition, done through Pearson VUE Education, ISBN number 13 97801 3477 2806. So again, copyright belongs to the author and publisher. I am just doing lecture reviews on the PowerPoints for each of the individual chapters. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on in. Chapter 5 is about people management. So we will use the term people management to refer to all aspects of security related to the behavior of employees and others who have access to the organization's information, data, system, and other assets. As many security experts have pointed out, superb technical solutions for ensuring protection are bound to fail if the employees don't understand the security responsibilities and the role they play in protecting the organization. They need to be trained and motivated to fully adhere to those responsibilities. Broadly speaking, this term encompasses two main areas. The first has to do with what could be called as an employment life cycle, the relationship of the individual to the organization prior to employment, during employment, and at the end of employment, termination. The area refers to humans as a human resource security. The other area has to do with the security related to training of employees, both in terms of general security awareness as well as in terms of use of IT assets. In this area, security awareness education is going to be the more focal point. These topics are covered in the first two sections of the chapter, followed by best practices. So human resource security. This is going to be encompassing all the security aspects involving the employee and HR requirements, hiring, training, monitoring, behavior, all of it. Cybersecurity is not exclusively a technical challenge. Though it is regulated to work with IT, it doesn't necessarily have to be. In the case of certain actions, an employee can compromise the security of the entire organization. Technical fixes cannot remove vulnerabilities inherent in the workforce itself, including things like social engineering, poor credential management, insecure, properly configured devices, and so forth. Employees, through training and awareness training, should learn the basics of the security practices. People often have a tendency to forget that HR does collect a ton of personal information, so oftentimes they are the ones that are being targeted for exploitation. So normally this HR has very specific security problems, and they fall into two main categories: malicious, non-malicious. Some people are unwittingly do something stupid. That's not malicious. Even though it did cause harm, they didn't mean to do it. Like, it wasn't intentional. There are those that are doing this intentional, and that would be classified as malicious at that point. Another huge part is the company does need to have a security awareness program, period. People are the target of attacks, so having a appropriately developed and rigorous security awareness training and then retraining as necessary, it's really important. Some people unknowingly violate controls and procedures because it's easy. That it makes their workflow easier, or whatever the case may be, but it still prevents a security challenge for the organization. The ISO 27002 Code of Practice for Information Security Controls lists the main objectives to ensure that employees and contractors and other business entities understand their responsibilities and their role as it's suitable for the role of which they are being considered. Basically, in order for you, the organization, to secure these contractors or other types of employees, you need to be certain that you understand that you need to train them and give them their appropriate awareness guidelines. That way they know how to, what to do. They know how to, their boundaries and whatnot. Essentially, this is so that business associates, which are vendors and contractors, all are on the same page when it comes to protection. So that includes, for people, doing background checks, making sure that the appropriate level of screening is done. The employer is responsible for all of the people that have access to that information and ensuring it is protected. So what are some general guidelines for checking applicants? Ask the applicant for as much detail as possible, as appropriate for employment and educational history that is within your scope of what you're allowed to answer or ask. Investigate the accuracy of the details. Arrange for experienced staff members to interview the candidates. For highly sensitive positions, again, investigative agencies do a background check, do a criminal background check, maybe even do a drug screening. It really just depends on the level of protection that you are going after. Check the applicant's credit score. Consider conducting a polygraph if appropriate. Ask the applicant to obtain bonding for their position. It really just depends on the position, the state, the location, and what you're legally allowed to ask. Because keep in mind, every organization, every country, every state, every province, every area is slightly different. So you can only ask certain things that are within the scope or the purview of your area. So keep that in mind. After you actually check the applicant, then you might even go into an employment agreement. As part of their contractual obligation, employees should agree and sign terms and conditions of their employment. That would be their employment contract. This should state their organizational responsibilities for information protection, information security, technology requirements, and acceptance of all appropriate rules, policies, procedures, and guidelines. The agreement should include a confidentiality, possibly a non-disclosure agreement, that specifically spells out what the organization assets and what confidentiality requirements that are there. It should outline the non-disclosure agreement and possible consequences. It should expect a strict confidentiality and prohibit information sharing except for those that are required for legitimate business requirements. The agreement should also refer to the organization's security policy and indicate that the employee has reviewed and agrees to abide by all of the appropriate required policies, procedures, and guidelines. So once we have a good understanding of employment and the users, we need to have some type of directory service. This will help manage the user identities and authorization data in a directory or directory service type format. Pretty common Active Directory where you have all your user objects and then you can centralize usernames and passwords and all of that. We have our whitelist. That's essentially a discrete entry list of what's allowed. Blacklist would be what's not allowed. You can do application whitelisting. That is where basically you say what's allowed and everything else is blocked. So you can say that maybe Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and Calculator are allowed. That means it would block everything except those explicitly approved applications. As employees grow and as roles and responsibilities grow, there are job descriptions that outline security tasks, like everyone's a frontline employee, support staff. These are some basic security things like use strong passwords, don't open unknown attachments, don't plug in unknown devices, report suspicious activities. And as the level of expertise and responsibilities increase, so do the security-related tasks by description. For example, senior IT executives should follow all things below them and ensure adherence to security policies and acceptable use policies. The cybersecurity professionals, again, ensure implementation and management of security controls, maintain current certifications, and again, all tasks below them. So the senior IT executives, the IT operations, the enterprise level admins, all of that below them, they should also be adhering to. Employees and all business associates need to be aware of information security threats and concerns, how to report those threats and concerns, be aware of the roles and responsibilities as well as the liability, be equipped to support the organizational policies in the course of the normal duties. Two essential areas are a comprehensive understanding of the policies and the acceptable use documents, and ongoing awareness training programs for all employees and enforcement of said policies, procedures, and guidelines. So these are not just go through the training and forget, they need to be enforced. Alright, so what are some key principles? Least privileges, separation of duties, limit reliance on key individuals. Dual operator policies don't have a single point of failure. Mandatory vacations. You want to keep these general principles in there. Least privileges, you want to make sure people only have what's minimum to do their job. Separation of duties, you want to make sure that there is a group of people that all have tasks. What I mean by that is maybe you have the check writing people. One person has the checks. One person is allowed to write or print the checks. One person is allowed to sign the checks. One person is used to distribute the checks. That group of people handle checks, but not a single person can do it all. Limit reliance on key employees. You want to make sure you don't have one or two key employees that everything is reliant on. Make sure we have dual operator policies, meaning two or more people to do key tasks. Lastly, mandatory vacation to ensure transparency. That way you can ensure nothing odd or fishy is going on, because everyone is going to eventually have to go on vacation because of the mandatory vacation policies, and then you can make sure that nothing weird is going on when everyone is on vacation. Another key concept that I keep seeing people fail at, proper termination. When you're going to terminate an employee, there needs to be steps. You need to be able to remove the person's name off of assets and authorize documentation. For IT personnel, you want to make sure there's no rogue admin access. You need to explicitly remove their permissions and controls and their access to critical things the day they're terminated, not the day after. So if you're firing an IT admin at 5 p.m., their account needs to expire. It needs to be put into the disabled group, login removed, password changed, all of that, so that the admin, when they are terminated, don't have the time to get back in and do anything malicious. Alright, so what are some of the learning pathways? Well, normally you start off with awareness for all employees. Now that should feed into security essentials, all users involved with IT, and that will include any type of technology literacy, security basics, and anything used to secure IT. That will feed into role-based access control and role-based training. Basically, you're going to get additional training for your specific area within the IT or security group. And then that should feed into education and certifications. That way, you can ensure proper level of protection based off of your individual job scope. And this is all outlined in the NIST 816 role-based models for Federal Information Technology and Cybersecurity Training, and NIST 850 Building Information Technology Security Awareness Program. So there are some additional areas, but again, awareness, security essentials, role-based training, and education are the appropriate pathways that everyone should start with. The awareness programs are crucial. The awareness programs are basically extended to all staff, and it's to get the understanding and the importance of security. And that includes all level of security, all level of employees. That way the entire organization and all of their staff understand security and the security responsibilities that each of them hold. So that is only one part of it. The culture of the organization has to be there. That means top down. This is going to be the extent to which the staff demonstrate and expect security behavior in the line. Meaning, if top management are pushing to do it and they're enforcing it across the board, it will probably happen. If someone says let's do it, but then there's not really a lot of push from the top, then it just kind of goes away. Culture of the organization plays a huge role. Part of that also then goes into the negligence behavior. When you're negligent, behavior that doesn't involve a motive to cause harm, but does involve a concise decision to act inappropriately. If you are negligent, you are going to be held responsible. And in organizations, that should be the case. Accidental behavior, and again, that's behavior that is done not to harm or to be conscious decisions to act inappropriately. Just sometimes accidents happen. Malicious behavior, on the other hand, is just that. Malicious. It's behavior that involves a combination of motives to cause harm and conscious decisions to act inappropriate combined. This is malicious behavior. So our security awareness needs to be done through all parties, all groups, all levels. It needs to seek to focus individual attention on issues or sets of issues as it relates to the organization. It needs to go from the top down. It needs to set the tone of the level of protection that is needed. It needs to reach all employees across the board. It needs to cover appropriate topics for the organization based off of circumstances. And it needs to be ongoing. Not one and done, but done regularly. So what are some of the goals? Some of the goals are providing focal point, communicating important messages, providing general and specific information, making individuals aware of the appropriate roles and responsibilities, being driven by risk consideration, ensuring that everyone has a basic level of understanding of protection, providing employees with an understanding of the different types of inappropriate behavior, creating a strong culture of protection and security, helping enhance the consistency and effectiveness of information security controls, helping minimize the number of extent of information security breaches that might occur, and again, working to build and foster a more protective relationship within the organization. Here we have our security awareness program. Again, plan, assess, design. We go through the processes. we execute and manage, evaluate, adjust, rinse, and repeat. This allows us to ensure protection. And again, this is a annual or semi-annual process. It's not a one and done. You continuously go through the process. So part of our awareness is also going to make sure that changes are done appropriately. So we have our configuration and change management. This is a process that seeks to ensure that only authorized modifications are made. And that includes having a plan, looking at risk, mitigating any risks as a whole, developing a measurable metric so that we know what our change is doing, and we have milestones that we can measure against, and we also have a revert plan or a fallback plan, so if the change doesn't meet a specific measurement, we can revert back to a operational state fairly quickly. Alright, going back to the awareness program communications, again, this is going to be communication materials and methods. Could be a call chain, it could be how to convey appropriate security measures. If an event happens, do this, do this, do this, contact this person. So there are communication materials that are out there. There are options for awareness program designers. You can use in-house material, handbooks, emails, distance learning, some type of LMS, videos, formalized workshops and formalized classes or training sessions, or externally, that's going to be email advisories, professional organizations and vendors, outside contractors, daily news and websites, periodical conferences, seminars, and external courses. So it really just depends on what information your company decides is relevant enough for their specific circumstances. Part of this awareness program also then would be identifying critical information. Critical information is information and or data that needs to be available and have the integrity of that data and information verified and checked. Essentially, this is going to be identified information that is relevant to the organization or to stakeholders within the organization, and it needs to be kept available. Some of it could also be classified as sensitive information, and that is information that can only be disclosed to authorized individuals. Whether it's a compliance requirement, whether it's intellectual property, it could be all over the place. So, short communications like messages or emails or instant messengers or Teams or Zoom or chat, whatever the case may be, you can cover tailored topics and the level of access to the whatever type of classification of that resource. So you can emphasize the differences between critical information and sensitive information, how you have to treat them. You might also have automated controls. For example, within Office 365, if it detects that you're trying to send a credit card number, the system then could treat it as sensitive information and then would block it out and block it from being sent. So there are controls you can put in place using current technology to kind of help mitigate some of the possible data leakage. And again, that's critical information and sensitive information. You could have providing updates and details of threats, reinforcing expectations for security-related activities, restarting policies, could be phishing campaigns, phishing training. Maybe you're having policy and procedural training because of an insurance requirement. Again, the awareness for communication is going to grow based off of the circumstances for your organization. This would also, again, really reiterate restating key policy points and ensuring that there's a consistent level of protection throughout the organization. So here is a metric for measure for a successful of a training program. Audit findings, did most people complete the training when they were tested? Did most people actually pass the tests? Phishing attempts are a great example. We'll cover how to spot phishing emails, and then over the next quarter, we'll phish our employees, and if they actually fall for a phishing attempt, then they have to re-go through training. So that's a really good metric. You can also have number of staff completing, accuracy, verification process for that. We also have a bring your own device. That is when it's an IT strategy that allows employees to bring in their personal devices to attach to the corporate network. That way, the company doesn't have to buy the same asset because the employee is using it. Essential programs basically provide two main purposes. Function to target users of IT systems and applications so that you can have your BYOD policies and develop security practices. It also provides the foundation of sequential, specialized, or role-based training by a universal baseline of security concepts and terms. The NIST 816 defines security essential programs as a program that refers to an individual familiarity with and the ability to apply core knowledge of basic systems. Essentially, here we are developing the essentials or the core level of a program so that we have at least a bare base level of expected controls and training portions that we're going to expect our users to go through. So who is responsible for the Essentials program? Everyone. Anyone that's going to be using a technology or a computer or an electronic asset probably should know this. Key topics that should normally be covered: any type of technical underpinning, language challenges, terminology, common information and computer system vulnerabilities, understanding common threats, common mitigation techniques, social engineering tactics, different types of cryptography algorithms that might be advanced for some users, understanding types of intrusions, understand, software controls, firewalls, intrusion prevention, and intrusion detection systems. And again, that may be more towards specific individuals, not everyone collectively. Understanding vulnerabilities, and again, that would probably be for everyone. Understanding vulnerabilities for VMs, again, more specific people. Social engineering, fundamentals of security, the security designs, the security design principles, and roles in limiting vulnerabilities. Again, this would go out to most people, maybe not everyone. Role-based training will be huge. Depending on your level, you would get the appropriate level of training. If you're management, you'd have certain controls in management. If you're operations, you'd have training in operations. If you're technical, it would be technical controls. Also, it's not just role-based training, role-based controls. Sometimes when we're looking at controls, we can apply the same controls, technical controls, operational controls, or management controls based off of criteria of the organization. So management, design, implement, evaluate, rinse, repeat, go through the process again. The nature of the training will depend on the role of the individual, and from there, you will have to manage the individual job functions, design the job functions to encompass the scope of the program, or develop procedures for that individual job scope, implement the appropriate functions, and then evaluate the individual's function, assess the effectiveness, and then go through the process again. And again, there is a education and certification pathway. There are IT certifications through SANS Corp or through ISC Squared that might help alleviate this high level, medium level, and some low level certifications as well. All of this goes back to understanding people management best practices, and that is understanding life cycles, responsibilities, and our awareness programs. Our awareness programs would be actual training programs, messaging, and the actual training itself. Alright, that is it for this chapter. We looked at the 4 phases in Cybersecurity Learning Consortium. We looked at overview of people management best practices, and we looked at what key security considerations for employment life cycles there are. Thank you. So this concludes our lecture review on this book. Questions, concerns, or thoughts? Leave a comment, make a statement, get a hold of me. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. Remember that when we do some of this, it is critical that we ensure that we're answering your questions. Don't just listen and don't try to apply. Listen, try to apply what we've been discussing, and when possible, if you're not understanding something, say something.